The American troops were among the most amiable soldiers for the Allies to interact with during World War II. Despite their late arrival, the Americans brought a certain swagger and infectious enthusiasm that significantly boosted the morale of their comrades. American soldiers quickly forged strong friendships, particularly with the Australians, Canadians, British, and even the Soviets. Though there were occasional cultural clashes and misunderstandings, the Americans were generally well-liked by their Allied counterparts. In this video, we will explore the intricate relationships American troops had with their allies, delving into the good, the bad, and sometimes the very ugly. Initially, Australians were hesitant to invite Americans down under, as they expected the British to assist them against the Japanese threat in the Pacific. Being part of the Commonwealth of Nations, this assumption was natural. However, Churchill decided to keep his troops closer to home to protect Britain, leaving Australia no choice but to seek help from America. The first American soldiers arrived in Australia in December 1941, just weeks after Pearl Harbor. By 1943, their numbers had swelled to over 250,000, with the majority stationed around Brisbane. On the battlefield, Australians and Americans shared a natural camaraderie, thanks to their common goal and language. The Americans particularly admired the Aussies' fighting spirit. In August 1942, the two nations, along with other Commonwealth allies, fought together in the Battle of Guadalcanal against the Japanese in the Solomon Islands. The offensive aimed to prevent the Japanese from building an airfield on Guadalcanal, which could have severed U.S. sea lanes to Australia. The operation was a success, showcasing the seamless cooperation between the Americans and Australians in combat. Back in Australia, the initial perception of American soldiers was quite positive. Their well-fitted uniforms, polite manners, and higher wages impressed the Aussies. Even lower-ranking American soldiers earned more than higher-ranking Australians, and their tipping culture added to their reputation as big spenders. The American presence influenced Australian culture, leading to the emergence of hot dog stands, American-style clothing shops, and cafes selling hamburgers and Coca-Cola. Some Australian women even adopted American slang, further blending the cultures. American GIs enjoyed the company of local women, resulting in around 12,000 Australian women marrying American soldiers and moving to the U.S. after the war. However, this popularity caused some tension among Australian soldiers who were already frustrated by the pay disparity. The sheer number of American troops in Brisbane, a city with a population of around 330,000, strained local infrastructure. The influx led to brownouts, school closures, and difficulties for Aussies in accessing their favorite spots, as hotels and bars preferred the wealthier Americans. These establishments served alcohol only twice a day for an hour each, forcing Australians to scramble for a place to drink, while Americans comfortably occupied the spaces. Additionally, American soldiers had better rations and access to products that were scarce for Australians, such as chocolate, cigarettes, ice cream, booze, and nylon stockings. These items were available at American post exchanges, which Australians were not allowed to enter. Tensions simmered, resulting in frequent brawls between Australian and American soldiers, sometimes as many as 20 a night. The situation escalated on November 26, 1942, when an American private named James R. Stein, drunk after leaving a bar, was stopped by an American MP who demanded to see his leave pass. The impatient MP arrested Stein, prompting nearby Aussies to defend him. The MP's aggressive behavior led to a physical altercation, drawing in more American MPs and Australian servicemen. The resulting chaos, known as the Battle of Brisbane, saw over 5,000 Aussie servicemen rioting, attacking MPs, and causing extensive damage. The riots lasted 2 nights, leaving 1 Australian soldier dead and many injured. However, the tension eventually subsided, and camaraderie returned. As U.S. Army Sergeant Bill Benson later recalled, "It sort of settled down and you go into a pub, and an Aussie would come and up and slap me on the back. 'Oh, wasn't that a good ruckus we had the other night?' and have a beer on me." From then on, Australians and Americans got along relatively well for the rest of the war. The long shared border between the U.S. and Canada facilitated a strong bond during World War II. Culturally similar and sharing a language, American and Canadian soldiers had little trouble working together. This deeper understanding fostered a strong camaraderie, which proved beneficial on the battlefield. The U.S. and Canada fought side by side in Europe and the Pacific, notably during the Normandy landings and the Battle of the Scheldt. On D-Day, Canada contributed 14,000 soldiers, 10,000 sailors, 110 warships, and 15 fighter-bomber squadrons. While Americans landed on Utah and Omaha beaches, Canadians stormed Juno Beach, successfully overcoming heavy German defenses and earning the admiration of their American counterparts. Americans served under Canadian command in several battles, most notably the Battle of the Scheldt in late 1944. Canadian and Allied troops fought off the Germans and opened a crucial shipping route to Antwerp, allowing 2.5 million tons of supplies to arrive between November 1944 and April 1945. American and Canadian soldiers often served in each other's militaries. According to Colonel Stanley W. Juban, in his book Military Relations Between the United States and Canada, 1939 to 1945, many Americans joined the Canadian Armed Forces before Pearl Harbor. By 1941, 1,200 Americans were in the Royal Canadian Air Force, comprising 10% of its officer strength. After Pearl Harbor, the number of Americans in the RCAF grew to over 6,000, with another 10,000 in the Canadian Army. Conversely, around 26,000 Canadians enlisted in the U.S. military following America's entry into the war. Despite minor differences in organization, tactics, and equipment, the Americans and Canadians maintained a strong bond throughout the war. The U.S. and Britain are often described as two nations separated by a common language, but this did not prevent British and American soldiers from forming close friendships during the war. The Americans respected the British for their resilience since entering the war in 1939, both on the home front and in battles across Europe and North Africa. In turn, the British appreciated the assistance the Americans provided. The Guide for American Servicemen in Britain advised Americans that the British are far more interested in getting together in solid friendship with us, so that we can all start dishing it out to Hitler. This mutual understanding smoothed over most cultural faux pas, except one major issue: racism. While racism existed in British society, the segregationist policies of the American military were a new and troubling development for the British. The American armed forces were segregated, and this practice was enforced wherever they went. However, British service members and civilians generally got along well with the approximately 150,000 African American soldiers stationed in Britain. Although there were some initial tensions, African American soldiers were often welcomed in pubs and admired for their manners, much to the chagrin of some white American servicemen. Racial tensions erupted on June 24, 1943, in Bamber Bridge, Lancashire. The violence began at Ye Old Hob Inn, a pub that served both black and white Americans. Two white American MPs tried to arrest a black soldier for being out of uniform, leading to a confrontation in which Private William Crossland, a black soldier, was shot and killed by a white MP. The incident escalated, with armed black soldiers defending themselves against white MPs. By the end of the night, 4 more people were shot, and 2 white MPs were beaten. In the aftermath, 32 black soldiers were convicted of mutiny, while no white MPs faced charges. The blame was placed on the MPs for their poor leadership and use of racial slurs. Despite this incident, British and American soldiers continued to fight well together in numerous operations, such as the Battle of the Atlantic, Operation Overlord, and Operation Market Garden. The relationship between American and Soviet troops during World War II was complex. Although they were allies, their interactions were limited, and their opinions of each other were often shaped by propaganda and second-hand information. The collaboration between British and American soldiers helped forge a special relationship that endures to this day. Americans admired the Soviets for their resilience against the Germans despite facing horrific losses. However, Without fighting together on major battlefields, their understanding of each other remained limited. Language barriers and differing political ideologies further complicated their relationship. American opinions of Soviet soldiers were often negative, influenced by anti-communist sentiments and rumors of Soviet war crimes. Nonetheless, when American and Soviet troops did meet, their interactions were generally positive. One notable instance was their meeting at the Elbe River in Germany in April 1945. American forces pushing east met Soviet forces pushing west, marking a significant milestone in the war as the two fronts converged. An even more remarkable example is the story of Joseph Barrel, an American paratrooper captured by the Germans on D-Day. After several escape attempts, Barrel finally succeeded in January 1945 and sought out the Red Army to continue fighting the Nazis. Barrel was injured in battle and taken to a Soviet hospital, where he met Marshal Georgy Zhukov. Impressed by Barrel's bravery, Zhukov arranged for his safe return to the U.S., where Barrel reunited with his family and married in 1946. Such instances of cooperation, though rare, demonstrated that despite their ideological differences, American and Soviet soldiers could find common ground when united against a common enemy. The intricate relationships American troops had with their allies during World War II were marked by camaraderie, cultural exchanges, and occasional clashes. From forming strong bonds with Australians, Canadians, and Brits, to navigating complex interactions with the Soviets, these alliances shaped the course of the war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, History Intrigued, for more captivating historical journeys and epic tales.